darkness still ruled the borderlands when the engines began to murmur. It was the early morning of the 1st of September, 1939, and along the invisible line separating Germany from Poland, thousands of men waited inside steel machines, behind reefless, beside horses, and within the quiet discipline of orders already given. For many of them, this was not just another military operation. It was the first time they stood on the edge of real war. The First World War belonged to their fathers. This one was about to belong to them. Silence pressed heavily on the waiting troops. Some stared into the night. Others checked equipment they had already checked a dozen times. No one spoke much. In the darkness, thoughts became louder. Would they survive the day? Would they panic? Would they fail the men beside them? Even those trained to hide fear could not escape it completely. War had not yet begun, but it had already entered their minds. On the Silesian frontier, a panzer commander looked out at a scene that felt unreal. A forest stood dark and still. The moon hung full above it, pale and distant. Thin mist clung to the ground, blurring shapes and stealing depth from the world. It felt less like the opening of a campaign and more like a stage prepared for something unnatural. Beauty and menace existed together, quietly waiting for violence to break the spell. At 4:45 a.m., the silence was shattered, not on land, but at sea. Near the free city of Danzig, the old German battleship Schleswig-Holstein opened fire. Once a proud participant in the Battle of Jutland during the First World War, it now turned its heavy guns toward the Polish fortress at Westerplatte. Massive shells roared through the air, exploding against concrete and earth. The war that Europe had tried to avoid was no longer theoretical. It was loud, destructive, and irreversible. Hidden aboard the battleship were German naval assault troops. When the bombardment paused, they rushed ashore, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they met fierce resistance. Polish defenders, outnumbered and outgunned, fought back with determination. The attackers were driven off with heavy losses. The idea that Poland would collapse instantly was already proving false. Inside Danzig itself, chaos unfolded. Polish volunteers rushed to defend the central post office, knowing it was both a symbol and a strategic target. They faced German stormtroopers, SS units, and regular soldiers who had been secretly brought into the city beforehand. The defenders fought desperately, but the outcome was never in doubt. After the fighting ended, most of the surviving Poles were executed. The war revealed its brutality from the very first day. Nazi flags soon appeared on buildings. Church bells rang, not in celebration, but as part of a choreographed display of control. Priests, teachers, community leaders, and Jews were rounded up. Nearby, work accelerated on the Stutthof concentration camp to house the growing number of prisoners. What began as invasion would soon expand into systematic terror, reaching depths few could yet imagine. Germany had not rushed blindly into this war. Hitler's decision to delay the invasion by 6 days allowed the Wehrmacht to strengthen itself significantly. More infantry divisions were mobilized, along with additional motorized units. Nearly 3 million soldiers stood ready, supported by hundreds of thousands of horses and vehicles. Many troops had moved toward Poland under the excuse of military exercises, carrying blank ammunition. Any remaining doubt vanished when live rounds were distributed. This was no drill. Poland stood at a terrible disadvantage. Its forces were not fully deployed, largely because of pressure from Britain and France. Both governments feared that a full Polish mobilization might give Hitler a justification to attack. Poland delayed, cancelled, reinstated, and delayed again its mobilization orders. The result was confusion and weakness. On the morning of invasion, only a fraction of Polish soldiers were in position, many poorly equipped and isolated. Poland's strategy depended on hope rather than strength. The plan was to hold out until France launched a major offensive in the west. French commanders had promised action within days of mobilization, but geography worked against Poland. German forces could strike from multiple directions, and they did. From East Prussia, from the west, and from the south through Slovakia. The pressure closed in. Polish leaders did not expect a Soviet threat from the east. The secret agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union remained unknown to them. The idea of two ideological enemies cooperating to destroy Poland seemed impossible. That belief would soon prove fatal. At 4:50 a.m., as German troops waited for their final signal, the sky came alive. Aircraft thundered overhead in endless waves. Dive bombers, fighters, and bombers surged forward toward Polish airfields. Soldiers cheered as they watched. They had been told the Luftwaffe would cripple the enemy before real resistance could form. They were also told that Polish civilians would fight dishonestly, that snipers and saboteurs waited everywhere. Fear and hatred were carefully planted before the first shot was fired. The German plan relied on speed and shock. Armored units, supported by air power, would break through defenses before Poland could organize. Army Group North advanced from East Prussia and Pomerania, aiming to link up across the Danzig corridor and drive toward Warsaw. Army Group South, under General von Rundstedt, pushed from Silesia, aiming to encircle Polish forces west of the Vistula River. Motorized divisions led the way, exploiting every weakness. In Berlin, the invasion unfolded alongside carefully staged political theater. SS guards lined the streets as Hitler traveled to address the Reichstag at the Kroll Opera House. He claimed Poland had rejected reasonable demands that had never been formally presented. A so-called peace plan was published to shift blame. Cheers filled the hall as he announced the return of Danzig to Germany. Diplomacy was reduced to performance. In London, certainty replaced hesitation. Once the facts were confirmed, mobilization orders were issued. Anti-aircraft defenses were prepared. The belief that Hitler might be bluffing finally collapsed. Still, the British government moved cautiously, drafting an ultimatum that demanded withdrawal but lacked a clear deadline. Even now, shadows of appeasement lingered. France followed a similar path. Mobilization orders were given, but the word war was avoided. Children were even blackouts were imposed. Leaders spoke in euphemisms, as if naming the conflict might summon greater disaster. Many still hoped for mediation, for delay, for anything that might prevent another catastrophe like 1914. In Warsaw, anxiety grew. The lack of decisive Allied action felt familiar and frightening. Polish leaders feared abandonment, yet had no choice but to continue fighting. Germany pressed forward relentlessly. Berlin remained tense and strangely quiet under blackout. New laws banned listening to foreign radio. Diplomats delivered demands that were firm in intention but cautious in tone. Hitler believed Britain and France would retreat at the last moment. He had been wrong before, yet success had always followed. By the 3rd of September, patience ran out. Britain delivered a final ultimatum with a clear deadline. When no response came, war was declared. France followed hours later. Europe was at war again. In London, the announcement was met with solemn silence rather than cheers. People listened, stood, cried, then prepared. Sirens sounded, then stopped. Tea kettles boiled. Fear spread alongside rumors. Cities transformed overnight. Sandbags, balloons, gas masks, and blackouts reshaped daily life. Across the empire, declarations followed. Ships sailed. That night, a civilian liner was sunk by a German submarine, killing innocents, and proving that the war spared no one. In Berlin, there was no celebration. Many Germans felt shock and dread. They had expected a quick victory, not a world war. Doubts crept in, even among leaders. In Poland, the declarations brought joy and hope. Crowds gathered, believing salvation was coming. They did not yet know how alone they truly were. Elsewhere, violence took uglier forms. Fear and anger turned neighbor against neighbor. Ethnic Germans were attacked in parts of Poland. Death fed propaganda, and propaganda fed revenge. Numbers were twisted to justify horrors yet to come. The war had begun not with a single moment, but with many engines in darkness. Shells at CR planes overhead, speeches in halls, and sirens in streets. It was not one decision, but a chain of them. And once the chain was complete, there was no turning back.